Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by The Record and NorthJersey.com. I'm your host, Art Stapleton. Well, the offseason program, for all intents and purposes, is over for the Giants. It's summer break for most of the players, but it is not over yet. We've got a big event next week, and we're going to get to that, and then I'll give you my takeaways and where the Giants stand heading into the summer with training camp just about 6 weeks away. It's kind of hard to see the offseason disappearing so quickly all the time. July 23rd is report date. July 24th is first practice. But without further ado, I will bring in today's guest, Nilay Shah, Senior Vice President of Marketing and Brand Strategy for the New York Giants. And he's been a busy man, not just for the last couple months, but for the last couple of years, preparing for this 100th season celebration for the New York Giants and everything that goes into it. Nilay, thanks for joining me. I'm sure everyone watching and listening is real excited about next week. But overall for you, have you been able to take a breath yet?
No, you know what? It's been an interesting 2 year journey, but a lot of the strategy's been in place over the last few months, and now it's time to go execute. So we're excited to roll a lot of this stuff out and let the fans enjoy everything that we've been cooking up.
It's kind of a game day, but it's 2 years in prep, right? For you and for your team and the different departments that have been involved. Take me back a little bit when it starts with an idea and the calendar is there and it's coming. It's not like all of a sudden someone just brought it up. Uh, those first couple meetings, when you think back to that, and now you've got this, and there's just so much to it, and I'm sure there are things and details that we have no idea as to how things have come together. What do you think about what was most important, you think, that you got from ownership, from the organization? We'll get to your journey individually in a second. For you've been in this in this organization for a while now, but just the mission, the message. What were you guys trying to accomplish when you started putting all this stuff together?
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting. Celebrations like this, they initially start as a marketing project, but you realize early on that in order to do something like this, you really need everybody to buy in. And we've been very fortunate that right from the beginning, everyone knew how important this milestone was. So we had bi-weekly meetings almost for the last 2 years. And really the idea was, what was our North Star? What could we do to make an impact both on the field and in the community? And I think the good thing is we aligned on four key objectives. The first one was, we wanted to make sure we celebrated all 100 seasons. It's easy for us to, gravitate towards the four recent Super Bowls, but there's four championships prior to that in 1927, 1934, 1938, and 1956. Whatever we did, we needed to make sure we encompassed all of that. The second thing was, how do we tell our story on a national stage? We obviously have all of our platforms, our YouTube channel, our social media accounts, but how can we target that 17-year-old kid in California and make him understand the history of this organization? The third thing was to make sure that we ultimately had activations for every single constituents in our ecosystem, right? Our season ticket members are obviously our most important, but we have fans who may never come to a game. We have fans who may come to only one game. So how do we create unique activations for each one of them? And the last thing is, this organization by nature is not gratuitous. We've done a lot of great stuff in the community over the last 100 seasons. But if there was ever a time to marry a marketing PR story with a community angle, this was the year to do it, right? So we really all aligned on those four things, which made the journey easier. And the second biggest thing was, we've seen the other teams, the Bears, the Packers, and the Cardinals have celebrated their 100th season prior to us. We're the fourth team. We kind of debated, should there be one major event or should we come up with a series of events and activations throughout the season? And we kind of aligned on the fact that we want to do something all year. So that those two things helped us guide kind of what our strategy was moving forward.
So we can get into, a bunch of stuff. I mean, everybody wants to talk about the jerseys and the uniforms and all that stuff. I always find the story within the story of the why and the how you got there. But let's talk about the event next week at the Theater of Madison Square Garden, because I do think for for Giants fans and even for people who just follow the Giants. I mean, I'll be there in a reporting capacity, but also just an appreciation for the names and the legacies and everything else. But it's the a night with legends, Giants 100 at the theater. When you set out to create an event, now you guys have done events in the past. You've had the town halls that have the similar flair, but you wanted to make this one extra special, obviously. How do you start putting together an event like this, and what is the most important thing you think to give to fans for this kind of event?
Yeah, and listen, and credit goes to my events department for really the ethos of this. But ultimately, I think we've done a great job with our community department, obviously events department over the years, doing a lot of alumni related things. We're fortunate to be able to celebrate a lot of anniversaries with the Super Bowls, but this one was the opportunity to how do we put something together that spans 100 seasons. So the first thing was you think through branding, right? Branding. A lot of the players obviously are no longer here from the early days. How do you kind of make sure that they're incorporated? So when you walk into MSG, we call it the throat, but there's obviously the area before you go to your seat. There's complete branding of things going back from to the first championship in 1927 all the way up to 2011. So there's collages everywhere. We work with the Pro Football Hall of Fame. All 22 busts will be here in the area for people to take a look at. We'll have a uniform history from all the way back from 1927 throughout the years. So things like that really let the fans integrate with the history. And then really on stage, it's a mix of obviously some of our current players to celebrate this season. Fans will be able to get their first look at a Hard Knocks preview for this upcoming season at this event. And then also we've done panels by era, and I'm happy to report. I know there's been a lot of questions on Twitter. LT will be there, Phil Simms will be there. We haven't publicized that yet, letting you know first. But we expect close to 20 or so of the greatest Giants throughout all of the eras. And for example, Pete Gogolak will be there. He scored the
Wow.
most points in Giants history, right? So like it's really a retrospective of really the 100 seasons. And we think it's going to be a great event. Joe will be there, Brian Dable will be there, and John Mara obviously, and it's going to be a great event. We're anticipating close to 5,000 people. And the good thing there, tickets are $25, but the net ticket proceeds go to our Giants Foundation. So again, going back to that last point, how do we benefit the foundation in the context of the 100 season? Those are the little things that we came up with.
Gotcha. I mean, so LT, Phil Simms, and then you just run the gamut. I know a couple other. Who else on the? I know you guys put out a
Yeah,
list.
so
Who else
Tom
is committed?
Tom Coughlin will be there, Bill Parcells will be there, Eli will be there, Harry Carson, George Martin, Joe Morris, Amani Toomer, Brian Kelly, great linebacker for us. Victor Cruz will be there. So really spans the entire era for as many players that are still around, and then the ones who are not, we honor them from a graphics and branding perspective.
Cool, cool. Now, it's funny you mentioned the 17-year-old fan in California, and I would imagine that's always the challenge. I mean, you look at the history of the organization, and it's hard sometimes. I mean, I have nephews who are teenagers. Not everyone wants to hear a history lesson. Everyone wants to see the present and the future, or what's coming next. How do you appeal? I mean, is that a constant challenge to make sure that people appreciate the legacy of the organization in 100th year, but also, you have to reach different categories of fans, and I would imagine that's always a challenge to know, okay, you can't appeal to everyone, but you're going to try to appeal to as many different segments of the fan base as you possibly can.
Yeah, listen, I think from a growth perspective, you're balancing. We have this rich history, but how do we distribute it in a way that relates to a younger demo, right? And Hard Knocks, and not to get too much into that, is a good example of that, right? How do you tell our story on a national scale? And ultimately, that's a great outlet, right? Because that's distributed on HBO. The casual fan watches that because of the nature of the branding of Hard Knocks in general. So we've basically juxtaposed a lot of our history in that show to really tell, the advancements that the Giants have made throughout the history. So that was one like quick way to kind of do that. Obviously, that took a long time to come and make happen. But really, social is a great opportunity for us. We're looking at influencers and how to integrate, some of the more current players with Eli and David Tyree to recreate those moments and make it and do it in a fun way on social media.
You mentioned Hard Knocks, so we might as well just mention it a little bit. Now, I know it's not like you all of a sudden, can start revealing everything we're going to see in Hard Knocks, but anyone who's followed this organization knows John Mara's famous sentiment that it's essentially over his dead body that the Giants would ever do Hard Knocks. And yet, lo and behold, here is Hard Knocks with a twist with the offseason. From your perspective, how did that process go as far as convincing everyone involved that this was a good idea? And do you have any apprehension of what you're going to see, starting on July 2nd?
No apprehension. I think everyone believes in what Joe and Brian are doing here. And ultimately, we've been fortunate from a team perspective. They've been very open to a lot of the stuff that we've done in-house. So that story has been there. Obviously, the cameras have been in Joe's office and in the draft room for all of basically the last 4 months. So a ton of things that not even our cameras have ever seen. So ultimately, convincing was really in the context of the 100th season, right? Scouting has been part of this organization from the beginning, very important. That this was the opportunity to highlight the organization in a way in the context of our 100th season. And I think from the minute we started having those discussions, everyone came on board pretty quickly.
How much would you say that do you have a feel as to what is going to be on Hard Knocks, or are you essentially a fan in that respect that you're going to tune in and see? I mean, you may get, advanced copies, but
Yeah.
is there a curiosity from your perspective? Like when you let the cameras in, from what I understand with Hard Knocks, you kind of know what you put out there, but you don't know necessarily how it's going to be played out there. From your perspective, I know you're a fan. I know you consume this stuff. What are you thinking? How anxious are you?
Yeah, no, it's going to be first time for me too, because like I said, like the cameras have been rolling. So ultimately things that we're not privy to, even though we're basically 100 feet away, it's going to be a learning experience for me as well, because, these guys work literally 24/7, right? So there's a lot of things that, we are not privy to that I think fans will have the opportunity to understand about the process and what it takes to put a team together.
It's kind of funny. You pull back the curtain, and you had laughed. I had reached out to you because I had gotten so much from fans. They loved the Giants life, the process, everything that you guys had done. And fans were like, where is it? Where is it? We want it. We want it. We want it. And then obviously the Hard Knocks announcement comes out. How hard was it to keep that a secret from an organizational perspective?
Yeah, it was candidly surprising that it didn't get out, just because the cameras have been here. But I think because of the robotic nature of a lot of the cameras, it's a lot different than what people anticipate with people with a handheld camera walking around. But I think everyone knew that our overall launch strategy, this was a big component of it. That whole week where we had one thing every single day, I think everyone bought in with the fact that, hey, we needed to keep this super tight. And obviously there's competitive advantages to that as well. I'm super proud that, we kept it internal. And the hardest thing really was, my internal team here does such a great job with the Giants Life series, right? And then we know the fans love it. That we still had snippets from the draft and things like that from Senior Bowl, et cetera. But to not be able to put those out knowing that we had this coming, it was a tough pill to swallow a little bit. But I think everyone understood that, hey, to the extent and to the scale that films and HBO can do, it's on a different level than anything that we could ever, really probably put together from an access standpoint.
Yeah, it's funny because you're in a tough spot because you can't go out and say, guys, wait, something's coming. But that there's a void because people really bought into the whole Giants Life series the last couple of years. So when all of a sudden, there were these conspiracies that started getting hatched on social media. I know if you didn't see them, you heard about them. The idea of why wasn't Malik
Yeah.
Neighbors' phone call shown, and he obviously was angry that he was drafted by the Giants. All that stuff that happens. It's kind of funny how it's almost like, well, just wait, and
Yeah.
you got to
You,
bite your
you,
tongue a little bit.
for something to be great, you got to have a little bit of self, control in that capacity. But we're super excited, and the first episode will be July 2nd, 9 p.m. And it'll be 5 consecutive weeks, right before ending, right. I guess the first week of training camp, and we're excited for the fans to get a peek under the hood.
One last thing on that, and then I want to talk to you about the jerseys a little bit. The cameras, from your perspective, when does the filming stop?
I think the filming will stop. This mini camp was the last one.
Okay, because
So
I
we had a
didn't
little
know.
bit of presence. Yeah.
I thought
Yep.
maybe they were going to wrap up and you include some of the Legends night, but I guess that
No,
on the
no.
field.
This mini camp will be the last thing.
Gotcha. All right, well let's talk jerseys because I'm
Yeah.
sure you're sick of talking jerseys for years and years. What I wanted from you, if you can, if you can't,
Yeah.
if you don't have that information, I know you and I have talked about it in the past. What are the rules and how has the NFL changed those rules as far as alternate jerseys and what you're allowed to wear? Because I know from talking to people in the organization through the years since I've been on the beat that it's not really a public thing. People, it's not like the NFL puts that out there, but you guys are really under a lot of restrictions in terms of what you can do uniform wise. And so the idea of a fan saying, well, we want a new jersey. Come on, it's time. There's a lot that goes into that whole process. Fair?
Yeah, very fair. I mean, just as a starting point, it's a 2-year process with the NFL to even consider doing anything new with uniforms. And if you, as a high level, if you were to go after your primary uniforms, you're locked in for 5 years on those, right? So if you change your primary uniforms for 5 years, you have to do that, right? So for us, really the process on the uniform for this year, and the other things, alternates, you're allowed to wear up to 3 times. I hear always on Twitter, why don't you wear your legacies and your color rush every single game? Because you're only allowed to wear alternates up to 3 times. And last year, we obviously wore our legacy blues twice and our color rush on the road, our color rush as the third uniform. So this year, we obviously introduced our century red uniform. Really 2-year process led by our creative director Doug Murphy. And really, what's unique for us is, and to be completely transparent, right? We brought back a lot of our uniforms over our history, right? So we obviously, the legacy uniforms we brought back 2 years ago. The color rush we introduced in 2016. We had the red uniform in, I believe, 2000 and I'll say 2007, but don't quote me on that. And then obviously when the NFL celebrated its 75th anniversary, we brought back the uniforms from Yankee Stadium. So there wasn't a lot to draw from. And I think the idea was, if we were going to do something to pay respect, homage to the players from the earliest days who literally played in front of nobody, who played for no money, this was the year to do it. I think we could all say that if we were going to get into a room and design a brand new uniform, it probably may not look like what ultimately we're wearing this year for one game. But the idea was, let's combine those eras, and I think the idea was you combine the eras and then ultimately pay respect to those players. We're going to wear it for our home opener. We have the option to wear it second time at some point later in the season. We haven't decided yet. But we think it's the players, when they saw it and when they modeled it, they've all loved it, right? And that includes, Wandell Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, Deontay Banks. They've all seen it and they love it. So we're excited to see that on the field. And for the players to celebrate the 100 seasons with us.
And that's what I said, and I'm sure I've put it out there. The idea is that you weren't looking to create a new uniform.
Yeah, no.
You were looking to create a tribute uniform for the 100th season that was going to stay as close to realistic of what you had back in the day. So everyone talks about the tan pants. Well, you have the tan pants because that's what they wore in the 20s.
We did not contemplate changing elements at all, right? So I've seen blue pants, gray pants. The idea was, if we were going to do this, we were going to go all in. We anticipated, some feedback, but I think a lot of the comments that I've seen recently is, now people are starting to come around to it. I think it's a different animal when it's on the field anyway. And the players like it, so we're excited to see it out on the field week 1.
Well, listen, it's been all this great information. I want to circle back to the Night with Legends. Give you, if people are looking to still buy tickets, and is a select number of tickets still available, where can they go? And what?
Yeah,
LT, and Sims are a big one.
That's going to be a great panel. Tickets are still available. I think we have less than 100 tickets left. You can go on Ticketmaster, or you can go to giants.com/100. It's going to be a great night celebrating the entire history. Like I mentioned, 20 or so players will be there on top of the current guys. It'll be a night to celebrate with the fans. There's a great giveaway on the way out as well, and we're looking forward to a packed house at the theater at MSG.
Now, before I let you go, I wanted to mention your journey a little bit, because I know you've been around, you've been in the organization for as long as I've covered the team.
Yeah.
How much, how much do you look back to when you started here? I think you were an intern, weren't you, when you started?
Yeah, my first day working here was 2004 April, when we drafted Eli. Literally my first day. Grew up a huge Giants fan. Got lucky to get an internship. Was the first ever intern in what back then was the digital media group or website group. And what's been fortunate for me is technology and the evolution of content. Kind of seen it all. That every 2 or 3 years this job reinvents itself. Grew up a huge Giants fan, and not many people can say they can work for their favorite team. And I've been fortunate to work for a great ownership group, and I think along the way, a lot of great collaboration, and we're looking forward to keep doing it for the 100th season.
Will there be a pinch yourself moment at some point throughout this process this season? Like you mentioned, it's not just one event, but is there something that you've been anticipating? Is it the Legends? Is it once the season starts that, you through all this hard work and collaboration that you guys will say, you know what, this was worth it, this moment, or has that moment already happened?
Yeah, I think for me it was launch week. Really just to get, you've been working on this for 2 years, and just to get some of the stuff out. I think the season ticket member box, that each account holder is going to get, got really good reaction, and you never know with some of those things. So we were excited about that. And then, the first game, we're going to have the top 100 players here, including at our Fan Fest that Friday night, September 6th. And really, we're going to roll those out 10 at a time to make the announcement on 100 to 1 starting in July, going all the way up into that first game. And, making these phone calls, a few people from our community relations department have been making those calls, and the reactions of, like a Joe Morris cried, had to pull over his car. You really understand what it meant to be a Giant for these people. And I think Wellington Mara said it best: once a Giant, always a Giant. So seeing that 100 seasons of history for that first game in that Fan Fest, and if the player is, no longer here, their family member, I think that's going to be a great, arena for the fans and for the organization ownership group to celebrate as a whole.
Nilay Shah, thanks as always. Great project. We're looking forward to seeing you at the theater at MSG next week with all the Legends. Much appreciated.
Appreciate it, Art.
All right. Thanks to Nilay Shah, the Senior Vice President for Marketing and Brand Strategy for the Giants, for joining me. I think you got a lot of good details there. I think you got perspective on the jerseys. I think the Hard Knock stuff is very interesting, that the Giants kind of opened their doors. But like I told you, it was going to be a lot of focus on the scouting aspect of things. That goes right to the heart of who Wellington Mara was with the Giants. Started out as a scout here. There's a reason why back in 2014, the Giants did the Finding Giants series. It's about the scouting. I think if those of you who remember that Finding Giants series, we'll probably see some of that similar background and footage this year with the Hard Knocks that starts on July 2nd. Nilay broke the news here right on All In, and it'll be on NorthJersey.com as well. Lawrence Taylor will be in attendance, is confirmed. Phil Simms, Eli Manning, Tom Coughlin, Bill Parcells. I kind of wondered if they'd try to get Bill Belichick to come by, but that may create too many headlines, unwanted headlines, especially for the current regime, if Bill Belichick is going to be looking for a job at some point. But we all know that storyline at this point. If the Giants struggle out of the gates, I think we're going to be hearing Mr. Belichick's name a lot more than maybe we should. But like I've said before, I don't believe anyone in the current staff is on the hot seat in any way. I think the Giants believe in Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, and I think this season, while important and there needs to be some urgency and some development of some of the younger players, it's time to step up. I do believe that they are sticking with this regime, that they believe that they are headed in the right direction and they have the right people in place. So we'll see. But again, thanks again to Nilay for tickets. You can go to Ticketmaster or Giants.com/100. $25, and the net proceeds go to the Giants Foundation, which is used in community efforts and outreach. So it should be a great night. I'm looking forward to it. I thought it was kind of cool. The details he said when you walk into the theater, they're going to kind of have setups where you're going to get to see all 22 busts of the Hall of Famers. I thought that was really cool. I didn't hear that detail before, that they'll have that at the theater. So if you've never been to Canton, which I've been fortunate enough to be there for Bill Parcells and Michael Strahan back to back, to see those busts in person, that's kind of cool if you've never been to Canton to see all the Giants and you're a Giants fan. So, should be fun. Should be a fun night. Like I said, the spring program for the Giants players and team ends on the field, or at least it ended on the field on Wednesday. They have an organization-wide barbecue on Thursday, which is when we're recording this show. The rookies will stay around until next week, have a little bit of a rookie symposium, stuff behind the scenes. They'll likely do some community stuff. I've been told that they're hoping some of the current players that they're going to have in attendance next week. It's the usual suspects. It's guys who are in the area. It's very hard. They have essentially 5 weeks to basically go out and vacation, and they want to continue their ramp up for training camp too. So it's really like a 2 to 3 week window that they can go away, enjoy their families, go out, go on vacation, that kind of thing. But I have been asked, and I heard that there is an effort made to get some of the rookies involved. I know some people love that part of the town halls that they've had in the past, where the rookies have been there. So I do know that the hope is that Malik Neighbors will be in attendance, and obviously he is going to be a big fan favorite from what we've seen overall. So that kind of leads me into the takeaways from this spring. A couple things. I had a column on NorthJersey.com. Make sure you check that out. Elaborated a little bit on Shane Bowen, on Mike Kafka's current role, the collaboration that Brian Daboll has talked about, being a good teammate, as far as not just the players, but the coaches. Is that a veiled shot at Wink Martindale and some of the coaches that have left, that maybe the Giants didn't have the collaboration staff-wise that they had hoped to have last year, or they felt like they needed to have? Also, position groups working together. The idea that the offensive line and the tight ends are working together in blocking schemes. They're trying to block it up. Carmen Brasillo and Tim Kelly with James Ferentz, the backup, the assistant offensive line coach, and Angela Baker, the assistant tight ends coach, so to speak. They've all been working together. So you put that together with the running backs. It's a little interesting look. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Charlie Bullen, the new outside linebackers coach, and Andre Patterson and Brian Cox working together with the defensive line and the edge group. Pass rush packages, guys working off of each other, stunts. That wasn't a big component of Wink Martindale's defense. His was blitzing. Here, I think you're going to see a lot of stunting, a lot of working together, a lot of team up front, trying to get that front four home to make easier on the back end, where, the reality is you're not going to see as much blitzing and guys left on an island, press man at corner, because that's Wink Martindale, and very little else in this league can say they blitz to the level that Wink does. So Shane Bowen will be aggressive, but I don't believe that you're going to see strict zone either. I think you're going to see a combination of zone and man, and see how the Giants can do from that perspective. So wanted to hit on a couple topics. Number one, I mentioned Malik Neighbors. I tweeted this, I've written this, but for those of you who haven't seen that, Malik Neighbors, watching him in practice, and really it's been over the last 2 weeks, because his spring was kind of disjointed. He came rookie mini camp. They didn't do much. They didn't have any of the draft picks in 7-on-7. They had the tryouts do 7-on-7. And then Neighbors had to go to the mandatory NFLPA rookie premiere in Los Angeles. So he missed a couple sessions of the OTAs. But when he came back, he's really started to take hold. OTA 9, which was the last OTA, it was a week ago, Thursday, that the media was involved in, that we were there to watch. Neighbors just put on a show. I mean, every route, catches, teammates, just you stand in attention watching Malik Neighbors practice. And for me, that has not happened here since year 2 of Odell Beckham Jr. Year 1 of Odell, he was sidelined with a hamstring, didn't get on the field until week 5 against the Falcons at MetLife. So for all intents and purposes, Odell was not around on the field, and that led to frustration, if you remember correctly, from Tom Coughlin. Why isn't this kid on the field? His hamstring issues. Neighbors is a different cat. He really is. And to watch him out there and to think 2 years ago, this team was pulling guys from the practice squad. Marcus Johnson starting in Tennessee for Dable's first game. Guys that were on the field, they have no speed. Remember that trade deadline when the Giants were kind of hovering and they had started, they had that dip in the middle of that playoff season. The idea was, well, are the Giants going to make a trade? Jerry Jeudy's name was floated out there. They ended up getting Isaiah Hodgins as a waiver claim. Hodgins played great down the stretch, was really Daniel Jones's best target heading into the playoff win in Minnesota. But to think where that wide receiver group has come to have now Wan'Dale Robinson in 2022 as a rookie, Jalen Hyatt last year, and now Malik Neighbors. I wrote that Neighbors is both a finishing piece and a foundational piece. And I can't say enough about his body control. It was kind of fun to watch the last minicamp practice. And I know some of you have reached out to me on social media and said, enough of these one-handed catches. But the reality is that's during a special teams period where they could just be standing around because they're not on special teams. Jalen Hyatt and Malik Neighbors and Allen Robinson II essentially go off with an assistant and they're working on routes and catching in the end zone. And that's where the one-handed catches start. Like they want them to practice the one-handed catches. Now, Neighbors does it so effortlessly when you see it happen. But yesterday it was kind of funny that Jalen Hyatt and Neighbors started competing with one another. Who can make the best catch, who can make it look as smooth as possible. And, you see these videos. I mean, obviously these videos go viral online. People love seeing them. So this isn't all they're doing. And just a reminder that, and this is going to come up in training camp again, we don't get to video. There's a part in practice where they say this is the last period that you guys are allowed to take photos and video. So our video is limited to players running on air. That's without defensive players. It also goes for the defense. I'd like to take video of a drill where Deonte Banks is in coverage, but he's covering Cordell Flott, and that, I don't think that gets people going as much. And that's really sometimes the purpose of putting the videos out there. So just keep that in mind that some of these videos, this isn't what they're doing all practice. It's just one period. But again, I can't say enough about Neighbors. you hope all the receivers stay healthy at this point, especially the guys at the top, because regardless of who the quarterback is, uh, these receivers have a chance to build something special. You saw the Spider-Man meme between the three of them, their celebration, Hyatt, Wandell, and Neighbors. And that's something I think you can see this relationship growing between the three of them. And that'll be interesting. So, Neighbors, worth the price of free admission this summer at training camp. I would definitely come out. You want to see this kid before he straps on the uniform and the helmet and the shoulder pads for week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings. I can't say enough. Again, is he worth the hype during the season? Well, we'll just have to see. But as far from a talent and aura, to use that word, since that's popping all over social media lately, he's got it, and he's fun to watch. And I think Giants fans are going to fall in love. Whatever number he takes during the season, and again, he said he's not married to number 9, and considering number 9 ends up as Graham Gano's number, and Graham has said, Neighbors has basically told him he doesn't want number 9, so that number 9 is not going to change. We're not really sure which number Malik Neighbors is going to take, so hold all your purchases until Malik Neighbors gets a number at some point in training camp or when guys start getting released, figuring out what number Malik Neighbors will wear as a Giant. Remember Jalen Hyatt going from 84 to 13 last year. That kind of surprised some people. That could happen again similarly for Malik Neighbors. Daniel Jones, no team drills outside of 7-on-7. They did no 7-on-7 at minicamp, so Daniel Jones was limited to practice reps. And look, I've watched him on the other field with the training staff, and he looks healthy. He's cutting aggressively, but we're just not going to know until Daniel Jones gets out on the field in week 1, because last year the deterioration and the regression of his game, had a lot to do with him getting pounded behind the line of scrimmage, and really took away his reads. That he was not reading his progressions the way you had hoped he would grow into year 2 in the system. So it's a wait and see. I can't predict that Daniel Jones all of a sudden is going to become the quarterback that Daniel Jones believers hope he can be. But I will say, and I've said this before, he's not as bad as right now what people are saying. And he's not at the point where his biggest fans believe he is either. That's why this year will be a very, very big season for Daniel Jones. And with Drew Lock behind him, I think, the Giants believe that Daniel Jones can win for them this year. Beyond this season, there's still a lot of uncertainty. So we'll just have to wait and see how this plays out and go from there. And I know you caught the video of Daniel Jones and Brian Dable. You couldn't tell if it was hand signals or if they were playing rock, paper, scissors. It was rock, paper, scissors. So reminiscent of several years back when Odell Beckham Jr., Saquon Barkley, and Sterling Shepard were shown on the sideline of a preseason game playing rock, paper, scissors. These guys love to compete. Jones is a competitor. Dable loves competition. Something as silly as rock, paper, scissors. Yes, during practice, they were playing rock, paper, scissors in between plays, in between periods. And that's something that, that is interesting that took place. So that's about where we're at. Make sure you go and read my takeaways. I had stuff on the coordinators. Mike Kafka seemed very at ease. Does that have to do with Dable doing all the play calling this spring and potentially this season? Maybe. Maybe the relationship between Dable and Kafka, maybe they had some heart-to-heart in the offseason and, talked about the future. Dable knows what it's like to be in Kafka's shoes, wanting a head coaching opportunity. So maybe he put together some things. He's talked about, Kafka's gone to injury meetings and things that the head coach has to do that the coordinators have no idea that the head coach is involved in. I think that was important. And the last thing I'd say is Shane Bowen challenges guys, especially his young guys, to go out and get it. Like, they wanted this to be a teaching opportunity in OTAs and in minicamp, but the coaches are watching. And I think some players kind of coasted a little bit. And I think Bowen tried to put an end to that. He said he talked to the team yesterday, the defense, and put it out there to us yesterday. Like, look, you need to come back to camp and go grab a job because these jobs are not going to stay open for long. And I like that edge that Bowen showed a little bit. A little different than Wink publicly. The only time Wink went after a player publicly was Xavier McKinney last year after McKinney's comments that kind of pointed a finger at Wink Martindale and the coaches. But other than that, Wink did not take players to task publicly, and that's fine. He did it behind the scenes, and certainly that's a way to go. But I think Bowen has a little bit more of an edge. At least he showed a little bit more of an edge Wednesday, that he wanted to show that, look, you guys have to understand it's time to step up, and it's going to be time to step up when camp begins. Like I said to Nilay, the 23rd of July is report date. The 24th is the first practice. Giants will have 2 joint practices with the Detroit Lions heading into their preseason game here. They'll have 1 joint practice with the Jets the week before their preseason finale. And then before long, it's going to be September 8th, and it's going to be the Giants and the Minnesota Vikings at MetLife Stadium for the start of the 2024 season. So again, thanks to Nilay Shah and to our producer, Paul Wood. Thanks to all of you for being all in. We will probably go a little bit on hiatus unless we have some breaking news to put out there on the show, which we'll be right on it if we are. But I would consider this our last show of the spring, and then we will come back the first week of training camp, and then have everything rolling from there on in. Make sure you watch on YouTube and continue to listen on your audio platforms. As always, I appreciate you being all in, and we're all in as well. So enjoy a little bit of a break. If anybody's going out to the Legends Night at the theater at Madison Square Garden, I'll be there. If you see me, make sure you say hello. If not, keep following on social media, all of our coverage on NorthJersey.com. Again, for Paul Wood, I'm Art Stapleton. We appreciate you being all in.